Senior video reporter at the Wall Street Journal, Shelby Holliday. Her team is out with new reporting on doctored photos being the big loophole that helped Russia exploit Facebook. Quote, this use of doctored images was a crucial and deceptively simple technique used by Russian propagandists to spread fabricated information during the 2016 election, one that exposes a loophole in tech company defenses. Facebook and Google have tracks to detect misinformation, but struggle then and now to identify falsehoods posted directly on their platforms, in particular through pictures. How scary, Shelby? What are good examples of that?
Yeah, we have a few examples in our story that show, number one, Russian trolls were extremely sophisticated. They were also swift and very streamlined. And number two, it's really hard for tech companies to detect some of the misinformation, disinformation in these photos. So the first example I'll show you is this example from Secured Borders, an anti-immigration account. You see on the left, this is a real sign. It was taken at a rally. And over on the right, the sign is photoshopped to give it a negative spin. Give me more free SHIT. That's a pretty basic technique they used. They loved to seize on these signs because it's easy to change the words. Another example I'll show you is from Stop All Invaders. This is an account that, as you can probably tell, was anti-refugee. The original on the left. On the right, as long as there's one homeless child in America, we don't have room for refugees. If you do a reverse photo search, you find that this is actually a kid in Ukraine posing for a stock photo. So this is another tactic they use. They would take a photo, spin it, take it out of context, post it online. Another example, Black Matters US posted this meme. The original photo's on the left. On the right, there's all this text talking about how African American men in America are effectively dying at the rate of an endangered species. First of all of that, those statistics are wildly misleading. Second of all, this photo was actually taken in Nigeria of a Nigerian boxer, this little fighter. And it was taken by a Nigerian photographer who, when I reached him, was shocked that it had been taken out of context. He had no idea it was used by Russians. But the tactic you're seeing here is embedding text in photos so that it's really difficult to detect. And then the last, and I think what is the most important example, was this photo posted by Blacktivist. On the left, this is an original photo taken by a college student, Tiana Lowe. She saw this sign on her way to class. If you look closely, it says, "No black people allowed." There's a Confederate flag, and it has hashtag MAGA. She looked into it, determined that this was a hate hoax. The sign was hung by a bitter neighbor, putting it in front of this campus house. She writes about it on a college blog post, and within 24 hours, the account Blacktivist had taken her picture. And if you look closely, they cropped it, they darkened it, they added a watermark down on the right-hand corner, they deleted MAGA from the sign, and then they spun it as an act of white supremacy. They totally took out the words hate hoax. And on the right, and you can see this on my Twitter account and in our story if you can't read the text on TV, they had all kinds of strange wording trying to gin this up as this terrible event. You could tell it was clearly intended to get people emotional and riled up. And there was one funny thing in the text. They called DPS, which most people know as the Department of Public Safety on college campuses, they call them a leading engineering firm. So, yeah. You know, you can see some hints, but you only really see them looking back. When you look back at these posts, then you realize, maybe that was weird. But when you're scrolling on your phones and when you talk to researchers, they'll say, these images are so effective. Number one, because images really do get you emotional. But number two, because you're just scrolling and we tend to believe what we see. Our brains are not wired. They're not wired to be skeptical of photos. We believe what we see it on our phones, and then we accept it and we move on. We scroll to the next one. So they're extremely effective weapons when they are used as disinformation.
Wow.
And it seems that, again, a lot of people are still trying to figure out exactly what the Russians were trying to do. I don't know that it was, in some of these cases, not so much focused on how do we elect Donald Trump as much as it is how do we stir as much division and hatred in America's sort of political conversation as possible.
Yes, and I do think that was a primary goal. We've heard that from the special counsel. We've heard that from people at Facebook. They definitely wanted to stir the pot. I also think they wanted to gain influence over certain communities, and they did that by posting photos like this, pretending to be advocating for a certain cause. And yes, it was a disinformation campaign, but it was also an influence campaign. They wanted Americans to do things. They wanted them to follow these accounts. They wanted them to vote a certain way. Perhaps they want them to to do certain things during the midterms. We've heard from Intel chiefs this kind of activity is not going to stop. And I also want to point out that Facebook, Google, Twitter, all these tech companies are years away from being able to detect misinformation in photos. They're working on algorithms that detect links and text, but photos are a whole nother thing. They rely on users largely to flag them. And like I said, our brains just aren't wired to question photos. It happens in a split second.
The question then is, Shelby, Facebook and Google, they do have to understand that they are more than just a platform to bring people together. This is going to be almost impossible to unwind or put the toothpaste back in the tube.
It's actually, and this is what's, I know, Shelby, this is at the center of the debate, but for Facebook, Facebook is a publisher. They publish. More Americans get news from Facebook than all other media outlets combined.
Which makes them responsible.
Now. So the question, I guess, is why aren't they treated like the New York Times or Washington Post or New York Post or Daily News? I mean, how much longer are they going to be able to have this exception?
They try to distance themselves from being a publisher, and they say that we don't want to police the truth, and you shouldn't want us to police what you're posting on Facebook or the photos that you're putting up. And it is a very difficult and necessary debate about free speech. But Facebook is adding employees, safety and security employees. They are expected to announce a fact-checking program for photos. The challenge is there's so much content posted on these platforms, and guess what? It goes viral. These photos and videos are promoted by Facebook's algorithm and other algorithms set up by tech companies, because those are the posts that do well. You guys are on social media. You're extremely good at social media. You know when you post photos and videos, people will engage with it more than if you just post a text. So the challenge is also magnified by the fact that Russia knows this strategy, and that, contrary to what some people have said, they were just a bunch of idiots posting wacky things. They were not. They're extremely good at finding the loopholes and exploiting them, and they will continue to do so.
So, and they learn. I mean, Mika, what Shelby's trying to tell you is that there's going to be somebody in St. Petersburg in 2018 campaign holding up a pig like you, or chicken, or cats, dogs, right? It'll
Least
go
of our
viral.
worries. The Wall Street Journal's Shelby Holiday, thank you so much. Great piece, great story. Really scary. Up next.